This is my 2011 Jaguar XFR, and this is a video I have been very excited to make for a very long time. It has been over a year since this car was properly on the road, and that is way too long for how fun and how fantastic this car is. At the end of the last video, you guys would have seen that I finally fired up the car for the first time, but it had not yet been finished assembly, it had not yet been inspected and re-registered and on the road, and now all of those things are done. This thing looks absolutely insane. We got the Jaguar XFR S wing and trunk all installed, along with a couple of other things that we had been planning to do to this car for a very long time, and my lord, is it fantastic. Let's get this thing fired up and go for a bit of a drive. This thing is so fantastic. We're all nice and warming up to temperature. Let's go for a drive. Honestly, it's pretty darn cool. I wasn't planning to do this video this way, and in fact, I have filmed so much in the interim, it's not even funny. Of course, the last thing you guys would have seen in the last video would have been getting the car fired up for the first time. It was still sitting on jack stands-ish. It was still not completely assembled. And since then, of course, we have finished proper final assembly. We have gotten this thing inspected and certified and back properly registered and on the road, along with remodifying a couple things, adding a new couple modifications, and a couple other just oddball details. And most of the stuff that I've done in the last month and a half since we posted the last video firing up this car for the first time is all pretty menial and tedious stuff. And I don't know, I figured it would be easier to give you a good summary of everything we've done now that the car is properly back certified and I've been able to daily drive it. I wasn't sure, it was one of those things where it was kind of undecided whether daily driving this car would be the plan. And I think with the current circumstances, it is and will continue to be the plan. This car is honestly so much better on the winter roads than I anticipated it was going to be, because I did drive the parts car briefly in the winter. I made a video about that. I'll link that up here in the corner. I did make a video when I just got the parts car, taking it for a first wheel drive, and it wasn't that great, to be honest with you, but it wasn't bad. And I didn't put it in winter mode. And I have been driving this thing since getting it recertified. And I know I am so horrible for not having filmed properly up until now. But I have been driving this thing for approximately 2,000 kilometers since I got it all recertified and back on the road. And if you drive it around in its winter mode, especially in drive, or honestly even in sport, playing around with the paddles, it's an absolute blast. If you put it in dynamic mode, which gives it its full power capabilities, its, most performance possible, it's almost undrivable in the cold, right? Like even just on dry, cold pavement, it just wants to light up the rear end. I've only actually had a couple days where it was warm enough and dry enough that I could get something resembling traction. But even then, it's been like just phenomenal. I was really worried after all the time I've spent in the Lambos and the McLarens and all the super fast supercar stuff that this thing would feel slow, and that is not the case whatsoever. It's a different kind of fast than they are for sure, being supercharged. Forgot, all the power's on the bottom. It doesn't really have a ton of top end, but it has a ridiculous amount of bottom to mid. I am just so happy to be back in this car. It has been a little bit of a process though, for sure, to get this car back all on the road. Obviously up until even just getting it all rebuilt. After the last video, we went and I reinstalled the front end. You see a couple clips here. After the last video, we have gotten lots done, of course, including getting the car inspected, which went quite well, honestly. After we did take the car in for inspection, they did end up having us change a couple things. Nothing too crazy. The three things they gave us issues about, these cars have tin capped lug nuts from factory, meaning that they have a steel lug nut that's got a tin cap stamped over top, and as they get old, they kind of tend to fail, and it is a royal pain in the butt. And there is 5 lug nuts that I had just peeled the tin caps off and not put them back on, of course, because with the tin cap on, the lug nut is a 19, with it off, it's just an 18, and they wouldn't let those pass, so I did have to get a few replacement lug nuts and install them. They made me swap the front brake rotors because the front brake rotors were basically brand new, the factory style ones. Funny enough, they were also a little bit warped, which is alright, it isn't the end of the world. We weren't planning to keep using them anyways, but we did have to swap them out. So right now, our fancy super lightweight brake rotors are on the car that we got with our haul of parts a while ago. And we will pull them back off. I've got a fun video in mind for some of that stuff, but we did have to at least put them on so they would pass it for the salvage inspection. And outside of that, we had to provide proof of having a headlight for the passenger side without a cracked lens. The headlight from this car originally didn't have a cracked lens, but it did have a couple broken tabs, and our headlight from the parts car had no broken tabs, but a crack in the lens. It wasn't leaking any moisture in, so we just put that on, and they did want us to provide proof of the original headlight that wasn't cracked. But upon doing those 3 things, I swapped out the brake rotors in their parking lot in the -20, -25 day, of course, that we ended up picking the car back up after the salvage inspection. But it went really well. I was quite surprised. They were quite fantastic to deal with, and the car is all good, done, registered, and happy, which is a huge deal because these salvage inspections are so intricate, it's not even funny. They don't let really anything slide. They're very particular. So the fact that we were able to get this thing all good, done, and cleared, all good in my books. I am super happy about that. There is a few other things we did in advance to make sure it had the best chance of passing as possible, but we'll get into that when we stop, and I'll look at a couple things in a couple seconds. But in the meantime, I'm gonna show you guys the first proper pull on camera since getting this thing all happy and done. And to be honest, guys, I don't know. I remembered this car being quick. It makes me feel very happy to have it all good, happy, back on the road and done. But I was kind of anticipating that it was gonna feel a little bit disappointing with all the stuff I've driven, the McLarens and the Lambos and things. Not a chance. This thing is freaking wild. Oh my gosh. It's too cold outside to get proper traction, but it's just, this car is so monstrous. Like, I'm sure if you were just racing from a dig, this thing would never take the McLaren or even probably a Huracan. But I mean, the frame of reference that we went into with building this car was trying to build something that was better than a Hellcat for cheaper. It's like significantly cheaper, and we have done just that. I've gotten to now drive multiple Hellcats along with even a Demon. And to be honest, this feels just as potent on the street as even the Demon did. And granted, the Demon is a ludicrous car, but it's a ludicrous car that is only really felt properly at the strip. And I haven't driven one at the drag strip, but just in street driving, this is just as crazy as the $150,000 Canadian Demon that we have at Exotics. It's wild. This thing, if you get into it at any real speed, it likes to light up the rear tires. It still grips pretty decent, honestly, with the Pilot Sport all seasons that are on it. It makes the best noises, like, give this a listen. As long as you coasting first, is as long as it'll crackle and burble. And that is with telling Velocity, when they did the tuning for this car, that I wanted a stock amount of burble, not more. They asked if I wanted more. I said no, but this is still what a guy gets. Of course, You can't argue with this car. It's quite funny. Over the last little bit, I have contemplated selling this car and replacing it with something else multiple times over. Obviously, it's a bad habit of mine. I'm always in and out of cars. I always have been in and out of cars. But this is the first car I ever did anything with on YouTube, and in a lot of ways, this is the first like real proper car I've ever had. Had a couple like American muscle cars before this. Had lots of little 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder cars. But as far as like a real like friggin' sports car, I guess. But I mean, as far as like a real proper, originally super expensive sports car, this was the first one. And I still am in absolute love with this thing. It's pretty hard to argue with how fantastic this car is. Considering at this point, we have not only, like, we didn't even just get this car for free. This car has paid us. Like, we're into this car for negative money, which is thanks in part to some clever manipulating of a parts car and due to a couple of insurance claims on this car. But the point still stands that this thing is ridiculously cheap for the amount of performance that it offers. On top of all the luxury elements and all the other things that we've talked about before, because this is supposed to be a very expensive car, and it feels and drives like it. It just so happens that we have managed to get our supposed to be super expensive car for pennies on the dollar. I'm gonna pull over here and show you guys everything we had to do to get this thing all buttoned up and done, because we have made some changes, we have done some things to get it all happy on all fronts once again, but it isn't honestly all that much. Let's take a little peek at everything we had to finish up to get this car all properly back on the road. Normally when I film clips like this, I always film them in the shop, and that's getting a little bit old, and at this point I figured why not go for a little bit of a drive, spend some time out in nice Canadian winter, and show you guys a little bit more. Of course the car is absolutely filthy, but that's okay. It's all part of the fun and games. You see, thing number one that we had to get all done was get the front end all wrapped up. That's all properly bolted back together, and everything's all happy and healthy. It's quite nice. Of course, we have a non-damaged cooler there in the front corner of everything all fixed up. Cooling system is all bled and happy. All the mechanical stuff we kind of finished up at the end of the video last time. There is a few things we did do. We finally did route all of the lines properly for the intercooling system. And I'll splice some footage in here. You can see the two lines there. That's about the only spot they're exposed. And they run down the entire length, all tied up nice and neat underneath. And it was even able to utilize this heat shield here to protect this line to go from there to there. So it all worked out quite fantastically. It is all 100% buttoned up and good to go. But that was a bit of a pain in the butt, just trying to get those hoses from right here underneath the bumper cover where they mount to the intercooler all the way down and back into here. And it is quite cool because this ties into some of the other stuff we did. But of course, those lines come into the trunk right there and into the intercooling pump. So we had to make sure that this time around, those lines had a little bit more space, because last time they were just running underneath the skid plate and they were exposed to the open, and it worked okay, but I don't know, I didn't like them being exposed to the elements and being whatever, this far above the road at all given times. So we fixed that. We did pull the skid plates off the other car because those ones were unscrewed with. These ones, we drilled holes to mount them on the underside and a couple things like that. And of course, the fender liner had taken some damage on this side, and so had the very front of the skid plate. So we have swapped that out and fixed that correctly, which is fantastic. Those lines are now run inside the skid plate, properly affixed in about 17 different places before they make their way to the trunk, which is quite fantastic. That's something I'd wanted to do even before wrecking this car, and I'm glad that it's finally done. And then outside of that, we've actually made some pretty cool progress in here. This is one of the things, like this little mat here, is something that we had gotten with our haul of parts that included the brakes, the wheels, the wing and trunk lid, all of that. But one step further, it's great, because we drilled some holes here and here. so that there is room for those little bungs on top of the icebox to poke through. And what that means is now we've got a fully functional trunk where we didn't have one before. Outside of that, we did replace all the self-tapping screws that were holding the icebox down with proper bolts that go through the trunk floor. That's all bolted down correctly. Along with, I built a little bit of a contraption to secure the intercooler pump in place. I basically just used a hose clamp with a nice little T fitting to twist, drilled that through the floor or into one of the existing bolt holes actually on the floor from where the factory sub used to sit. So that hose clamp is actually bolted to the floor, and then there is a piece of split in half intercooler hose, like this black hose right here. There's a piece of that that wraps around the motor of the intercooler pump here to make sure that everything's all secure, happy, and that's now properly tied to the floor. This is one of those things, when I did ask the guys at the salvage inspection shop if the icebox was gonna be an issue, that's one of the things they mentioned. And they said it was okay that it was there so long as everything was secured properly. And if the pump was just kind of hanging out loose, I don't think they would have passed it. And that's how it was before, and it didn't move. It was kind of stuck in the spot where it was in because of the placement of the hoses and whatever else. But now it is properly secured, it's not going anywhere, and it's quite fantastic. One of the things we have changed since the salvage inspection, of course, is we opened our valves back up, because there is the two cutouts underneath here that make this car sound so insane. The back boxes are aftermarket on this car already, and we ran it like that for a few days after I got the salvage inspection all done, but it just doesn't sound anywhere near as fun as without the plates in. And the plates are, of course, something we could put back in kind of at any moment. It's honestly, it is quiet enough with the block off plates in and out, really, that it's not bad for pissing off the neighbors. It idles fairly quiet, but with the block off plates pulled out, it definitely sounds more rank and ludicrous, and I'm all for it, especially in a car that's making as much power as this is. Outside of that, we haven't yet changed the third brake light from this one to the one in the wing, because of course, this is the third brake light that comes on a Jaguar XFRS. And personally, I do think it looks quite a bit better. It will be pretty sweet when that is the third brake light. For now, everything's still wired up to this guy, which the nice thing is it will be kind of hidden. You won't really notice that there's a third brake light in there that's not working once we do change it over, but for now, you definitely notice that this one isn't working, and it's something I want to address. But for the time being, the wing is here, it's functional, it's bolted down correctly, and the new trunk looks fantastic. We're still probably going to end up swapping out these guys. These are the pre-facelift style taillights, and of course, this is the post-facelift style trunk lights. And I do probably want to get post-facelift taillights. They look a lot better. They have kind of like a nice LED bar instead of kind of like a bunch of halogen-esque bulbs inside. But for now, they work great. There's no issues with it, and it does do exactly what it's supposed to. Outside of that, we got a fresh windshield. Of course, the windshield that had been in the car wasn't too bad, but it had one crack down the middle, and that has since been replaced. I don't know, outside of that, engine bay's been buttoned up. We gave the car a complete once-over. One of the things, as we'd mentioned here, we did have to swap the front brake rotors, and that is our super lightweight ones in the front and the stock style ones in the rear. You can definitely tell that the steering in this car feels quite a bit lighter than it did before. And I'm really excited because one of the next things as well is getting these tires all mounted up to the forged wheels that we have for it. I thought about keeping these as a winter setup and using that as a summer setup and getting proper sticky summer tires. And we still might do that here in a couple months and put some proper sticky tires on to see if this thing can't get traction once the road conditions are decent. But at least for the time being, I'm honestly not that stressed about it because these do hook pretty damn decent. They are still a very good tire with lots of tread. And at least then we can put the sexy wheels on it and run them like that for a little bit, along with get the lightweight wheels, because the weight differentiation in the wheels we're about to put on is supposed to be huge, and same thing with the brakes. And we are gonna measure that and properly weigh the old brakes and the new brakes and the old wheels and the new wheels, but not just yet. So that's the cool part. The car is all done, happy and on the road. We still have lots to do with this car. I don't know how far we're gonna take it. I am midway through trying to get the next phase of the channel and the next phase of my car career all settled. Everything has been fantastic over at Exotics. As of the new year, I have been officially promoted to doing some sales along with acquisitions and the marketing side of things, which is very, very cool. There's going to be some content soon to be seen on our Adrenaline Exotics channel talking about some of the cars in-house and a little bit more of, not a sales-esque approach, but a little bit more of an in-house approach to what we're doing at the dealership and the sales slash the cars there. A little bit separate from the things here and what I'm doing. But for the time being, this thing is at a great version, I don't know, 2/3.0. There's still lots to do. There's still lots cosmetically to do. We are going to switch up the tuning here. We are going to potentially add a couple more power adding goodies outside of the new ported blower and all the other things we've done. And then the cool part is the next thing with this car and the next video with this car is going to be this car back on the dyno. And I am super, super hopeful that we can hit the numbers we want. We are going to still modify a few more things that are going to bump these numbers up, but it's overdue to get back on the dyno for a version 2. And I'm sure there will be a version 3 that will hopefully bump this car even further than it currently sits. But for now, we've added the ported blower. We did the upper pulley, the lower pulley, the catless downpipes. We did the ice box and all the cooling modifications. And then as well as the lightweight rear brakes and the lightweight rear wheels that should have this car put down some seriously good numbers. Obviously, the original intention was to have this thing make just as much power or be comparable to a stock Hellcat for a fraction of the price. I'm really hoping slash thinking we've done that. And in order to do that with the, you know, accounting for drivetrain loss, factory Hellcat makes 707 horsepower, and we need to make approximately 610, 615 horsepower to be on par with the factory Hellcat. We're gonna have some new tuning, some more power goodies, and a couple things soon to come to this car. But for now, at least, we will find out what this thing is making, and that's gonna be pretty freaking special. In the meantime, I want to know what you guys want to see next, because of course there's some changes happening in my life, some very, very big ones that are quite fantastic. Of course, all of the time playing around with the exotic cars and stuff at Adrenaline has been so cool, and we're kind of just getting warmed up on that side of things. There's still lots of changes we have yet to make with this car. There's still a couple other cars that you guys haven't even seen yet that I currently have, that I have yet to make videos on. Things have just been busy enough that it hasn't really been feasible just yet. I've got one other super sedan that you guys have not yet seen that I'm super excited to share with you guys, and I don't know how long it's gonna stick around, but we do have a few videos to make with that car and a few cool things to do with it. Of course, the M6 is gone, along with a couple other things in the fleet. Things have been moving along so freaking fast that it's been quite difficult to try and keep up. There's even a couple cars, like my wife had a Ford Focus RS. That thing was so cool, and we had it for a while, and we sold it because she put approximately 30,000 kilometers on it, and we wanted to get back out of it before losing too much value in it. And you see, that's kind of what I've always done, is we both do a lot of driving. We have a car for a little while, and then it gets sold, and that's probably what will continue to happen with some variation. But for the time being, I want to know down below if there's anything too specific that you guys want to see. Of course, there's a full cosmetic set of changes that this car has yet to go through, both inside and out. So we're going to get rid of all the wood grain and put all the piano black from the other car, along with a couple other interior modifications. I've already done a couple things like reinstall my gauge setup and put in my radar detector, a couple things like that. And of course, in the exterior, I'm sure we will be doing some body kit-esque elements, some carbon fiber, some fun bits that way, along with probably a color change that should be in the works here. But for the time being, I am super happy to get this thing on the road. We're gonna do a dyno video with this car soon. We've got a winter exotic car rally that's gonna be coming up here in the next few weeks as well, again with Royal Rally, that should be an absolute blast, and all sorts of other cool stuff on the horizon. I'm super stoked to keep making content. Let me know below if there's anything super specific you want to see. I'm super stoked to share as well. We've got some Code 3 Media hats going. This is one of 5 colorways. If you take a look at the channel or at the Instagram account, there is some posts up, and these are available for sale, along with I will be doing some giveaways on them on the next handful of videos. In the meantime, I'm gonna go back and get doing some more shooting, changing a few more things on this car so we can go get a dyno day done. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much for watching. Have yourself a wonderful day.